Greetings and welcome to another edition of Montpelier Connection. Here we are. It is post-election, a very challenging election for some people, an interesting election for the pundits, and we will be going back to Montpelier with a number of new faces. I am not one of the new faces, but I am still Representative Mike Mrowicki, and I'm grateful to the voters of the Windham 4 district of Putney, Dummerston, and Westminster for re-electing me and my district mate, David Dean. Today we'll be visiting with one of the local new representatives that will be gracing the Vermont House of Representatives, Emily Long from Newfane. Welcome.
Thank you, Mike. I'm happy to be here.
Great. I think every year we turn over a number of people, faces in the House. I think they'll be a little bit different. Looks like that Republicans picked up 8 seats. We will still be holding quite a significant majority. But we're looking forward to getting to work now. That has started for us. The meetings have started to line up now from individuals and constituents that want to meet with us before the session, and we want to meet with them. Now, Emily, you bring a lot of experience from the Newfane School Board, from the State School Board Association. Could you tell the viewers a little bit about your experience, your history here in Vermont, and
Sure.
and what you hope to bring to the State House?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I'm a native Vermonter. I was born in Townshend. I was raised in Newfane, and I did start my school board career back in 1994 on the Newfane School Board. I was recruited to fill, as school board members often are, I was recruited to fill a position that was open, and I served there for quite some time and then moved on and was actually written in to the Leland and Gray School Board. So I've been on the Leland and Gray School Board.
Which towns does that district
Leland and
cover?
Gray serves Townshend, Newfane, Brookline, Jamaica, and Windham, the 5 towns. So
that's quite a spread.
it's quite a spread. It's a good spread, yeah. So I like I said, I was born here. I've spent my whole life in Vermont. I lived 10 years in northern Vermont, but I've come back and came back in the 80s, had our kids here. We have 2 adult children who both live and work in Vermont, which is, I'm hearing, quite unusual to have kids stay in Vermont. I do have, we have 2. My husband and I, my husband's an artist. We own and run an art business, have for about 40 years. Yeah. That probably has freed me up quite a lot to be able to spend the amount of time I have on school boards. I really enjoy the work. Yeah, you know, so.
It's a process, and we were talking a little bit earlier. How do we share that process with voters and constituents? Here it is November, but we're starting budgets. The budget process has started for March town meetings. Have you started a Newfane?
We well, yes, we have at Leland and Gray. We've started. We vote Australian ballots, and we vote in February. So we have to start a little earlier. And I'm also chair of the Windham Central Supervisory Union Board, and we're already beginning on our budget there as well. So yes, we've begun the budget process. We've set our parameters and our goals and our vision at the high school board level. Sent that to the administration, and now we're waiting for a draft budget to come to us, which will be very soon.
Yep. And that process will be ongoing, though, between now and February, right?
It will be ongoing in different capacities. Right now, we're trying to reach out to the community and trying to get feedback from the community in whatever way we can. It's always a challenge for people to be able to get out to evening meetings, but if they can make it, we really encourage them to come and give us their thoughts about it. We struggled last year at Leland and Gray. We did have 2 budgets defeated before the 3rd one passed. That's unusual for us. And we're very concerned about making sure that we're meeting the needs of the students, but also of the taxpayers. So this year we're hoping that we'll get a little more feedback. We've had better attendance at our meetings recently, and we're hoping that, so we'll have a process in place, but we'll vote on a draft budget to propose to the taxpayers. We'll vote in December on that. And then from then on, it's just a process of getting people to come and learn about that budget.
Yeah. So there's lots of opportunity and lots of time for people who want to weigh in on their local budget.
There is. There is. We hold extra meetings, and we'll be we hold extra meetings, and we'll be advertising them as budget development meetings. So hopefully people will know. But they can always reach out to us as school board members. They can reach out to the administration. They should be reaching out if they have thoughts and concerns, and most especially attending meetings if they can, because that really helps.
A couple of the biggest drivers in budgets are healthcare costs. And transportation and fuel costs. What are they looking like now this year?
Well, healthcare looks like it's going to go up a little bit for us this year. I can't recall the exact percentage, but it sounded like a 4 to 5% or something like that percentage for health insurance for our staff. Our budgets are made up of multiple things, as you know. 80% of our budgets, though, are in salaries and benefits for staff. So that's the largest portion of our budget always. Transportation is, it's been a little better managed because now we actually, due to previous legislation, we now do our transportation through the supervisory union budget. That's been a very good thing for us. We've been able to, make our bus runs a little more efficient for our students and to reduce the cost a little bit. So that's under control to some extent.
Yeah, I mentioned those two things because there's not a lot we can do about those costs, and we're really at the mercy of the price of oil, which is low right now, but who knows where that's going to be in 2 months. Similarly with healthcare costs, although I think we've been noticing, and this is concurrent to the Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, that the rate of increase really has slowed down.
It has.
Which was one of the big intentions, is to cover more people, get a grasp on spending.
It has. It's expensive, though.
Yeah.
Any way you look at it,
Yeah.
healthcare is expensive.
Yeah, you bet it is. And we like to say that education can be expensive as well, but not as expensive as the alternative of not having an educated public. And it's one of the challenges we're going to face this year. How do we right-size our budgets and still support good education? A lot of people are feeling like they're at the max of what they can pay for on their property taxes and the education costs in there. At the same time, for the most part, we have pretty good outcomes. I think when our challenges occur, or we can notice them when we look at certain demographics within our student bodies, that often students in the free and reduced lunch categories, in the lower economic demographics, tend to have more struggles, and that correlates to some lesser performances. At the school board association level, on the state level, how are they perceiving what we can do better and differently to help focus on the students that really need some extra help?
Yes, it's the center of our conversation. And it has been for quite a number of years, honestly. The achievement gap is a challenge for all of us, there's no question. I am president of the Vermont School Boards Association. We have spent quite a lot of time in the last few years reaching out to our membership, which is 1,450, I think, school board members around the state. We've held regional meetings. We've had an awful lot of feedback. We held a series of regional meetings last March. Got some great feedback from board members all over the state. It's a real advantage of mine, I think, that I'm able to be in a leadership position at the state organization, the Vermont School Boards Association, because it's allowed me to be able to travel around the state and hear from all kinds of different communities. And while we all are committed to the same opportunities for kids, our opportunities are not always the same around the state, and our needs are different everywhere we go. We are working very hard to try to come to, grips with the fact that educational opportunities are not the same, and that costs are increasing. They have been increasing at the same time our student enrollment has decreased. And of course, decreasing student enrollment causes tax rates to go up, and it's a struggle for us.
How does that work? Now, one of the things a lot of people struggle with is how do we explain our funding formulas and our systems. And for instance, the 3 towns I represent all had minimal increases, but they did have increases in their spending. What that translated into, though, was significant, almost 20% or more increases in the tax rate. And part of that, I think, was because we had fewer students. Is there any simple way to explain that?
If you want a simple way to explain the education funding formula, I don't think there really is an easy, simple way to explain it. On the other hand, you know, it's pretty simple to understand that we have a statewide education system and funding system. So whatever decisions that are made at the local level will impact everyone. And so it's really important for school board members to keep that in mind, that every decision we make at a budget level is going to have an impact elsewhere. It's always a challenge, but the other thing that's very simple to explain is that if student enrollment decreases, and even if your spending is level, your tax rate will go up if your enrollment decreases. So board members need to be keeping that in mind. You know, we're torn all the time. I mean, here at Leland and Gray, we have wonderful programs, and we receive quite a number of tuition students at Leland and Gray, which it's been great for our school. If we reduce our programs, we know we won't have as many tuition students, or we assume we won't have as many tuition students coming, knowing they're coming for our programs. So there's always a balance. You need to find it.
Yeah. Are there ideas around funding that have been cropping up in your travels around the state from Leland and Gray School Board, from the School Board Association?
Yeah, there's always a lot of thoughts. I don't think there's any, and no one's out there saying, I've got a great idea and this is what we should be jumping on. I think for the most part, most people understand that our education funding system is in fact unique not only in the area, but it's unique in the country. And I experienced that at one point when I was attending a National School Boards Conference, and we had a panel of experts, about 4,000 people from all over the school board members from all over the country in the room. And the panel had a woman on there who was, you know, being taken to task because of education funding systems in the country. And someone asked her, isn't there any state who's doing it right? And she said, well, I guess you could say Vermont might be the closest to doing it right. So ours is quite unique, but it has its drawbacks, certainly. And as our enrollment has declined, it's been, you know, I think the most difficult thing is the lack of understanding about the formula that we have.
One of the things that I think sometimes we forget is that after the Brigham decision, which forced us to look at how we fund schools, the law that was crafted was called the Educational Opportunity Act, because what the Supreme Court said we had to address was the inequities in schools around the state of the options that the opportunities that students had from their schools, and it varied greatly, mostly based on economics. 2 years ago, we had a study done. It's called the PICUS study. It's, if you want to go to the legislative website, you can see a copy of that. Basically, what they say is the law has accomplished what it set out to. The law was not about equalizing funding. The law was about equalizing educational opportunity, and that those places that were really lagging behind have made great progress. And it's not that we don't have more and better we can do, but we're on the right track in that regard. I think the next step is how do we tweak that formula to, I think, take into consideration the factors we've been discussing, declining enrollment and increasing costs?
Well, I mean, it does need to be looked at. It needs to be looked at from both angles, not just the funding, but in fact our spending and our opportunities for kids. Because Rebecca Holcomb traveled around, our Secretary of, our new, almost not new anymore, but our Secretary of Education, Rebecca Holcomb, traveled around with the Vermont School Boards Association this fall to our regional meetings, and she shared quite a lot of data and detail around opportunities for kids in the state. And what we're finding is that students aren't all receiving anymore the same educational opportunities town to town. And often schools feeding into a single middle or high school come from very different backgrounds. You know, some students will have unlimited access to incredible science programs, and other schools will be sending kids who've only had access to 1 or 2 science courses. And that's really challenging when you bring them all together. So we need to be facing that. School boards also need to be really thinking about, as our enrollment has declined and our staffing levels have stayed the same, whether we can maximize our resources in a better way and become a little more creative in the way we operate our schools. So that's the challenge, and that's what I think we need to be doing. We're getting a lot of feedback that it's time to be looking at all those angles.
Yeah. I've been working on the House Human Services Committee, and we understand the needs just keep increasing. I think more and more, though, one of the things we're looking at is not every problem is solved by throwing money at it.
Right.
And not that we have unlimited money and resources to throw at any problem, but sometimes the problem is just looking at it in a different way. I think similar to what Einstein once said, that you can't solve a problem at the level it was created. Last session, there was quite a bit of discourse and some controversy around a proposal the governor put out there around school consolidation. The new secretary similarly was espousing school consolidation. And I think one of the things we notice or aren't aware of in the southern part of Vermont is that in other parts of Vermont, consolidation means a very different thing. Most of us belong to supervisory unions here, which for the most part meet the criteria that were set out. In other parts of Vermont, though, there are single towns, sometimes small towns, that are their own district. And I think that's where a lot of the push is. Perhaps people have heard a discussion on VPR recently from the Woodstock district, where they have 3 schools. One of the schools is down to about 30 students. And some of the parents are coming forward and saying the educational dynamic is really not best when you have, and that was, I think, in a K through 6. From a school board association member, from a local school board member, what are you hearing locally? What are you hearing statewide about that plan? Is that evolving?
So
big question, sorry.
Well, no, there's a lot to that question. It's really important. I have personal experience with this because Leland and Gray was participating, not officially, but as part of a regional education district study. The 5 towns feeding into Leland and Gray did enter into the process. We engaged the community. We did the study. We nearly went to the voters with a vote. Decided at the last minute, after you mentioned about the governance conversation that was happening at the State House. At the same time, we were thinking of going forward. There was a lot of negative feedback in the area about any governance change, so we decided to hold off and not move forward with that. But we learned an awful lot during that process. And you know, you need to keep it about education. You need to keep it about the students. That's always a challenge. There's quite a bit of that going around the state still. You know, people are still talking about it. There was a vote just yesterday up in Chittenden East, and I believe that passed with one. It's a modified unified union school district, and they passed that without one town. I think Huntington didn't vote for it. But so that conversation is happening all the time. We do have a different system down here. I think people don't realize how quite rural we are and how many small schools we have in southern Vermont. And when I share that with them, they are often quite surprised. But there are supervisory unions around the state, all over the place, with small schools. And we see, when we look at some of the data especially that Rebecca Holcomb has shared with us, we see a pattern, you know, where opportunities are maybe not as good as they could be, and expenses are maybe a little higher than they should be in certain areas of the state. So we're trying to figure out how to grapple with that.
Yeah. When Bill Clinton was president, one of the things they were putting out there was the Classroom Reduction Act, because a lot of places, especially urban areas, had really ungodly numbers of children. And I know someone that came from an urban area and locally and said they couldn't believe how wonderful size the classrooms are. And I think our schools mostly are looked at as small schools, and we do well with that. I think the idea of a small school being a detriment is not something I agree with, and in some instances we should maintain our small schools. I think some of the questions we're answering now is how small would a school have to be before the educational dynamic really deteriorates from what's best for our kids. And I think that's another discussion we're going to be faced now, because those school populations continue to diminish to the point of where do we make those decisions that are really based on what's best for the children?
Right, and that's the key to this, is making decisions that are based on our students and not based on the adults who are in the community or even in the community as a whole, because we get an awful lot of feedback from students saying that they would like more opportunities in their schools, and we are fortunate to get that kind of feedback so we can try to frame the conversation from that perspective. It is a challenge, honestly. The part about small schools, it's a lot of people consider a small school a 20 and a lot of 20 kids in a school, and a lot of other people consider a school of 300 as a small school. Yeah. So in Vermont, we have many small schools. Yeah. You know, we are made up of mostly small schools.
It is perspective. I had a friend who has since passed on, retired to Vermont, and when I first met him, he described himself as the headmaster of a small boarding school in Pennsylvania, Germantown Friends. He said it was only 900 students. And in the Philadelphia area, that's a small school. 900 would be this was an elementary school, pretty big school. There are high schools that aren't that big in Vermont.
I speak to school board members on a national level in all kinds of areas around the country that they have 5 school board members serving more students than we have in the whole state of Vermont. Yeah. We have about 82 or 83,000 students here. Right. And you know, they managed to do that with multiple schools most of those are in urban areas.
As we move forward, one of the issues that seems to be rising up in regards to the cost of education in Vermont is our staff to student ratio. What are you hearing around the state, and are there ways we can look at that?
It's always a challenge. First of all, we operate quite often in isolation of each other, and as school districts do. But because of that isolation, we don't very often share a lot of staff. And as the enrollment has gone down, the student-teacher ratio has changed, you know, significantly, in fact, across the state. We have, I think, at this point, one of the lowest, certainly in New England, of, you know, student-teacher ratios. Student-staff ratios, I think, are about 9.9 per each staff member, 9.9 students for each staff member, and that's a challenge for us, and much of the reason why our expenses are so high. We are talking about, we keep hearing feedback and talking about ways that we can maximize resources as far as staffing levels, and that is a challenge. We are, again, rural. It's hard when we all have our own school districts and we hire our own teachers. That's the challenge of how do we manage to increase staff levels, student staff levels when you're in a small building of, say, 100 students. It's really difficult to do. Yeah. That's what drove the conversation last year, in fact, you know, and for many years.
We'll be submitting our requests to the speaker soon on what committees we'd like to be working on. Is it a big jump to assume you'll be looking to work on house education?
That will be my first choice, absolutely. I would love to be able to continue in this work that I've been doing for many years, and I am deeply committed to the students, and not just to the students in Vermont, the taxpayers in Vermont, the citizens of Vermont, but mostly to public education, because I see public education as being threatened in this country.
Yeah.
And I think it's the cornerstone of our democracy. I think we need to preserve public education in the best way we possibly can. And it's being threatened everywhere, and it's being threatened in a different way in Vermont, and that's because of the challenges we have with opportunities and cost. So I would love to continue to work in that capacity.
Yeah. I agree with your point that public education is one of the foundations of democracy, especially here in Vermont, where participatory democracy is what people expect. Perhaps one of the things that what we like to say in the State House sometimes is one of the nicest things about Burlington is its close proximity to Vermont. And there's a different mindset coming out of it's as close to an urban area as we have, and I don't think people in Burlington really understand what it is like to go to town meeting, what it's like to expect to be able to stand at town meeting, and how everybody has that expectation pretty much in our towns. And that, I think, comes from growing up in a small school, growing up in living in small towns, and being expected to participate, and then taking advantage of that. That was one of the things that I think was evident last year in the conversations around consolidation, that there wasn't an understanding from some people in parts of Vermont as to what was happening, let's say, in the hinterlands.
I think that's absolutely true. I think that's an advantage of mine, having come not only through small school systems myself personally and raising my kids in an area, the same thing, but working with small schools all over the state of Vermont. I would say that, I think rural schools probably don't understand a lot of what's happening up in the Burlington area as well, where they have their own sets of challenges that we don't have to grapple with as well. So it does work both ways. One thing I will say is that the passion that I witness, not just locally, and I certainly see it locally, but the passion I witness around the state of Vermont for our small local schools has not diminished. If anything, it's grown. But I think there will be a time when we're going to have to really think about challenging the way we think about school systems and trying to find a way to not lose that passion we have for our small local schools, but maybe think outside the box and try to come up with another way to operate, because if we don't, I don't know how we're going to continue, maintaining those small schools. Yeah. And they are often the very heart of a community. You bet. And they need to be, they need to have a voice. The community needs to have a voice in them.
And our school boards are bridges between the greater community and the school community. I don't want to start another large conversation. We only have a few minutes to go. What are you hearing about Common Core around the state? Is it letting our teachers teach better than No Child Left Behind?
It's really interesting. I think I've got a little different perspective about Common Core maybe than some others. I hear about it all around the country. When I go to the national level, other states are having a terrible time with it, honestly, and are even saying, why are we in this? We should be out of it. I'm not hearing that in Vermont, and I'm very proud of the fact that in Vermont, we have kept it very low key. We had a wonderful presentation, and anybody can watch that on the Brattleboro Community Television at Leland and Gray. We had a presentation from two of our staff members about the Common Core, and because we're starting to really go forward in implementing it. I think I've heard mostly good things. Yeah. I mean, it's always going to be a challenge to change, and often, I will say, frankly, it's frustrating to go through a process with, one system and now change it again. But what's really important is that we're providing the best education we can for our kids, and I think the Common Core is probably a good step in the right direction, for us there. Yeah. Good standards, along with the new EQS, the education quality standards that were adopted just last year, so they're great too.
Well, we're about out of time.
Already.
If people want to get in touch with you, email. You won't have your legislative email yet, even though you've been elected until January. Is email a good way to get in touch
Sure,
with
it
you?
absolutely is.
Sure.
If somebody wants to contact me personally about any statewide issue, you can contact me at emilyjdlong@gmail.com.
Great, and they will show that on the screen when,
Great.
As well, hopefully.
Just so, school boards all have, I have a school board email too, so if you want local, elong@windhamcentralboard.org.
Great, yeah. And we want to hear from people. One of the reasons we do these shows is that we want to hear from you. We want to, especially as we're preparing for the next legislative session, we want to hear what's important to you. We want to hear how you feel about some positions we may have taken up, and that's how the process works. As you hire us to take your positions to Montpelier as your representatives. So welcome, congratulations on your election.
Thank you very much.
I look forward to a productive session working together. We have a great contingent here. The Windham County delegation really does work well together for
Fantastic.
the people of this county, and look forward to this next session.
I'm very excited about it.
Great.
I look forward to it as well.
All right,
Thank you,
thanks.
Mike.
Emily
Appreciate
Long,
it.
the new representative from Newfane. That's it for today's show. I want to thank the people of BCTV again for doing such a great job and helping us bring our work to you. And until next time, this is Mike Mrowicki. Thanks. Bye-bye now.